Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic today, Tim. We have, for the third time, a new friend of the show on. Every time this gentleman has come on, he has brought to the table an amazing conversation, incredibly thought-provoking, and it is no exception here that he discusses with us a topic that happened a little while ago, but we intentionally pulled this one back for a few weeks just so that we could time it a little bit better and not create a conversation that, well, I'll get to later on. We didn't want to create a conversation that we didn't intend to have. So I'll clear that up later on. But Tim, you need to clear up for me how you're doing today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for asking. And yes, I'm excited to introduce this conversation with now third-time guest, Jim Rathmann. Jim Rathmann previously joined the show to discuss the crime documentary Under the Radar and serial killer Peter Mangs. And Jim is, of course, in that documentary, and it's really a great documentary. If you haven't checked it out, you should scroll back and at least listen to the episode and the interview we did with Jim about it, because it is fascinating. Jim also joined us to discuss the first assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And like this conversation, that was not a political conversation, but in this conversation today, Lance, we are speaking about the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump that happened on September 15th, 2024 in Florida. And there was a suspect arrested. 58-year-old Ryan Ruth was arrested. Jim is here to speak about it because he is a former Secret Service agent.
So we want to have the appropriate people to come on when we're discussing anything, and to have a former Secret Service agent on in the present day. He protected former President Barack Obama. He protected soon-to-be former President Joe Biden. So he is dealing with modern-day Secret Service activities. We really wanted that first time around to understand what the breakdown was, if there was any breakdown of the Secret Service of protection, because that's the topics that we cover. I mean, this is about the highest level of public true crime you can get. And to have it happen a second time, we had to have him back on. You did say the first conversation was not political. This conversation is not political, but it's almost impossible to not consider politics when you're discussing this. When I said that we were holding this one back a little bit, that's entirely why. The election was right around the corner when we first recorded this, and we didn't want to put this out and make anyone think that we were trying to influence the decision of any voter in this country one way or the other. I think that we made the right decision, because now we can listen and consider this conversation simply from the point of view of an attempted assassination attempt on a former president, not some sort of political lever that we want to pull.
Right. Absolutely not intentionally political on our part. I mean, I think it's just like we've covered JFK's assassination. We have even spoken about Abraham Lincoln's assassination in the form of John Wilkes Booth. This past summer was a moment where a former president was nearly assassinated twice. So we very well could have been talking about these moments for years to come, decades to come, like JFK one or Lincoln one. I do want to say, I'm almost a little surprised that we don't have more information out about Ryan Ruth, like his mentality or anything. When it was announced that they arrested him, I was happy that he was taken alive, because usually that's not the case, and it wasn't the first assassination attempt. Yeah, I feel like we don't have too much information on where that guy's head was at, even at this point, a month after we recorded this interview.
Yeah, other than what Jim tells us in the interview, that it was very politically motivated based on the activities that the United States were performing in the Middle East. He had some manifesto that he wrote, but you're right, there hasn't been a lot more released on this individual, which is another reason why I'm happy that we're releasing this episode now, because we even mentioned in this conversation there's an assassination attempt on a president, and 2 days later we were moving on. That's incredible to me. So just to bring this back out into the public domain feels right to me, to keep the conversation going. And Jim is nervous that this is just the beginning, that this isn't going to stop, that people are going to be emboldened to do this over and over again because we don't react to it anymore, because we forget about these things. So regardless of where you stand in the political arena, this is just an important conversation to have, because it speaks to where we're at more as a society.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Check out Jim Rathmann's website at jimrathmanthecompany.com.
It's the best website name ever.
And please follow us on social media at Crawlspace Podcast or Crawlspace Pod.
And we're going to break real quick for commercial, and we will return with Jim Rathmann.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program. Welcome back to the podcast, Jim Rathmann. Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime you want. I got to start off by saying there's a gentleman in our industry. His name is Mike Morford. He has been on the show numerous times. You've been on 3 times in the past 2 months. I think it took Mike a year to get on 3 times. And rumor has it that he is fuming, that he's so jealous that you're going to outpace him in the next few months. If you happen to come across anyone who's like, that guy's Mike Morford, steer clear. He is out of his mind with jealousy.
Well, maybe I can offer him a beer, and we can just sit there and chat it up for a while and drink some beer and laugh, and then we both come on your show together.
Oh, wow. Good round table discussion. I love that.
I think that'd be a great idea.
Well, welcome back. We love having you on the show because you provide so much insight into all of these things that are happening in the current event world. You came on to talk about your docuseries about Peter Meng's Under the Radar, which is super fascinating. We've been recommending people to that. And then we had you on because you have this incredible background. You used to be a Secret Service agent, and you spoke about the first assassination attempt on the former president. But for anyone who needs a little bit of a recap, can you just give a quick background on who you are?
Yeah, a lot of my friends, they joke at me all the time. They tell me I'm like Forrest Gump, but with an education. I always laugh at that, because I feel like I've kind of dabbled into a little bit of everything. But no, my background, I'm an ex-athlete, played college football, won a national title at LSU with Nick Saban. Started my law enforcement career, did everything from uniform patrol, undercover narcotics. I was on SWAT, or Special Response Team, for a while there. Got into homicides, was a homicide detective. Eventually ended up in the United States Secret Service, protected President Barack Obama, our current president Joe Biden, basically every number 1 and number 2 from all around the world, because that's one of the jobs the Secret Service does. And on top of that, I got 9 years of military experience as well, both enlisted and as an officer in the infantry. So I feel like I'm pretty well rounded, gentlemen.
Certainly a great person to speak about assassination attempts, especially the recent ones on former President Donald Trump. The second one happened September 15th of 2024, and of course that was after we spoke with you after the first one. This one was quite different in that it didn't draw the same kind of media explosion. It was still an assassination attempt nonetheless. Can you tell us about your thoughts when you first heard about this one?
Shocked that it happened so soon, because we're only talking 2 months after Butler, Pennsylvania. I don't think this one got as much media attention, only because the suspect didn't actually get a shot off. I remember hearing about this, and immediately I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But my gut tells me, unfortunately, it won't be the last one either. I think they're going to stop at nothing at this point. The world has gone mad. I think the political rhetoric is insane. I think people are just out of touch with reality and need to get a grip. But yeah, quite shocked. But I'm also incredibly grateful that the Secret Service agent that was walking in advance on the golf course, being 1 or 2 holes in advance, was paying attention and being diligent, and saw the barrel of the rifle and immediately engaged that threat. Truly believe that had that agent not done his job that day, not had been as diligent as he was, I think we'd be having a completely different conversation.
I completely agree with you, and I have a follow-up on that, the preparation that the Secret Service had in this one compared to the last one, but I want to back up a little bit. You said that you don't see this as being the last assassination attempt, and you're not specifically saying just on former President Trump. This could be an assassination attempt on any one of the number of politicians, whether it's a president, vice president. It could be any one of these people who have themselves exposed. I guess this is a question that's more like a soliciting an opinion from you and even from Tim. How many more of these are going to happen? It's already happening, but how many more of these are going to happen before it's just commonplace, before we read about shots fired and we move on? I mean, that is absolutely wild to me, that we could have a news story like this that we just kind of move on from by lunchtime. Do you think that this is going to end up being so commonplace?
Well, I think we, went into some dangerous waters, and I think what ended up happening was with the political rhetoric that's going on both sides, it's inciting people from all over. So you have those on the right that are mad at those on the left. You got the left that's mad at the right, and I think that's inciting people. But I think we live in times today where you have copycats. You have people that want their notoriety. They want to be famous for their crazy act. I think mental illness is a major issue that we have in this country right now, and it's completely out of control. And, when you look at these people that are committing these crimes, or we want to specifically speak to assassination attempts, they all suffer from some sort of mental illness. I mean, you look at the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania, you look at what happened here with Ryan Ruth. I mean, this guy has been arrested previously for, I think he was arrested for explosive devices at one time, firearms-related charges, suffered from mental illness. I mean, there's just a litany of things. It's unfortunate, but I think both sides are susceptible to this. I think there's going to be more people that are, enticed to commit these acts of violence. And I think it can happen to either political party based on the rhetoric that is going out there. The Secret Service has also, unfortunately, been exposed the last 2 months for their loopholes or whatever has happened to the Secret Service. I can assure you that the Secret Service that I'm hearing about today is not the Secret Service that I served in. So what exactly happened there? I mean, we could always take a deep dive into that on your podcast, but I think those things right there create a recipe for disaster. And I think the rhetoric that's been out there and the amount of hate that's going on, I don't think this is the last assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. I think there'll be another one. And my gosh, if he wins the election, then I think they're really going to ramp it up at that point. That's just my personal belief. I don't have any proof behind that, but from what I'm seeing now, that's what I see.
The proof is sort of what's already been going on, and the pattern in which we're seeing it all play out. And I like the way you're approaching it, because we all know that there are issues in this country that go beyond just political rhetoric. I mean, we've had political discourse for hundreds of years, right? Like, we've had each party disagreeing and having their public arguments on some platform. I liked your approach with saying that it's not just one thing. It's a litany. It's like mental illness. It's access to information, to weapons, to explosives. It's a combination of a lot of things that go into someone making a decision to pick up that weapon, get in their car, research where someone is, go to that location, and commit themselves to pulling the trigger. That is something that is now, I think, and tell me if you disagree with this, you mentioned copycats, but this is emboldening people who were just on the brink. And now it's in their heads, if this person can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually think some of the rhetoric out there is purposely designed to incite somebody to cross that line. I think it's purposefully played right now. I think some of the politicians out there have been pushing that button. I think they've been inciting people. I fully believe in your constitutional rights to be able to assemble, to be able to voice your opinion, to protest, but peacefully. I don't think you block roadways. I don't think you burn down your buildings. I don't think you harm other people. To me, that is no longer a protest. That is just a violent act. And so I disagree with that. But again, we have politicians out there that are pushing those agendas. They are public figures as well. The politicians that are pushing it, they are just as susceptible to being attacked themselves. And I think they all need to come to reality and realize we need to stop what we're doing, and we need to get back to the basis and the focus on politics that help America get better, no matter what your beliefs are in that, and making the country better in the best way they can see it.
Can you take us through a little bit of a timeline of what happened on the day of this second assassination attempt? Now, I understand the former president was golfing and the Secret Service was ahead of where Trump was on the golf course, a couple of holes ahead. Could you just take us through the practice of clearing a golf course?
Former President Trump no longer being in office, he doesn't have access to the entire Secret Service and all the numbers that you need. So even though they may have beefed up his security and added people to his detail since the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, it still is very much short on what is needed in order to secure a golf course, especially one of that size. But again, the Secret Service made some critical errors, in my opinion. opinion on what they could have done in order to secure the golf course. It's a lot of work. I mean, I remember back in the day, we used to do everything from, you used to walk to patrol, you'd have cars driving up and down the streets and the routes, and you're checking everything and you're sweeping it, and you're making sure it's as secure as humanly possible. But I don't think they had the numbers here. I mean, the fact that public road is so easily accessible to the fence line of the golf course, and this guy basically scouted it out for a month. We found out since, with the information that's come out since September 15th, but he created a sniper's nest, and we know that he was there for 12 hours. And what I don't understand is that we, or the Secret Service for that matter, why on earth are we not using drones to help cover a wider area when you have less personnel? You can add thermal imagery to them, night vision, so there's all types of technology you can put on these drones that you can fly in rotation. Somebody's manning the tactical command station 24 hours a day. So why isn't there people monitoring those screens as you're flying these drones around looking for those types of things? And if you find something that's odd, you send somebody that's on duty to drive out there and check it out. The fact that this guy was able to lay there for 12 hours blows my mind. But more importantly, how did he know? Because what I understand, former President Trump was a last-minute decision to go play golf. Who would have tipped off this guy to know that, hey, I need to lay out at this hole at this particular spot and stay there for 12 hours in my sniper's nest, knowing he's going to play that day, when not too long before that, nobody even knew he was going to be playing golf. So I find that to be strange as well.
Okay, can you say that again? That is really important. I just want you to emphasize that.
Yeah, I mean, we know that he was trying to stalk the former president for about a month. He was trying to track him and things such as that. But what is strange to me is it wasn't, from my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding is it was a last-minute decision from former President Trump to go ahead and play golf that next day on that Saturday. And then ironically enough, this guy knows to sit in a sniper's nest out by the 6th hole for 12 hours, completely unnoticed, undetected. Former President Trump got to the 5th hole, one hole away from where the sniper's nest would have been. To me, I don't know how that guy would have known that is the particular day, when he wasn't even going to play golf anyway. It wasn't until it was, I would imagine, the day before, that Friday, before he decided he was going to play golf anyway. So how did that information get out and get leaked for this guy to know to be in that one spot? To me, I find that to be quite strange, and I think they need to dig a lot further into that.
We say a last-minute decision. It probably wasn't like literally a last-minute decision. It wasn't like he was driving by and he was like, oh, let's stop in here so I can do a quick, 9 holes. It was probably like within a day.
It was less than that. It was apparently Friday afternoon to early evening before he decided to play. So you're talking at maybe 15 to 16 hours, and this guy's laying out there for 12?
Yeah, it like coincided with him making that decision to go there. Like he prepared this.
Take it a step further, too, because, look, I have never been one to be a conspiracy theorist, but when things just don't add up and they don't make sense, you got to call it out, okay? And so when you look at the fact that former President Trump made this last-minute decision to go play golf, and lo and behold, this guy knows to sit there for 12 hours. But let's rewind it. Let's rewind it to Butler, Pennsylvania. You're talking about a 20-year-old kid who was a cook, all of a sudden has phones. He's got the ability to know exactly which building is not going to be protected. He's able to essentially walk past the magnetometers, go around the magnetometers, I should say. There's no choke points, no cutoff points. Go to the only spot that's completely unsecured, lay on top of that roof for several minutes and be able to fire off a shot. He was able to completely and utterly outsmart the United States Secret Service. How does a 20-year-old able to do that and know exactly where to go? And then let's add to the fact that he used a drone that the Secret Service should have been using out at that site. But this 20-year-old knew, let me go ahead and fly this drone and get my aerial surveillance. But on top of that, I'm going to take out a rangefinder and get my distance, right? Let me judge the wind. So he's doing everything in the world in the exact spot, the only spot that is completely unsecured in that entire venue site. To me, I don't know how a 20-year-old does that without some sort of inside knowledge.
This guy Routh, right? Ryan Routh. Now, he was, by all accounts, mentally ill. Like, what are the chances he's just parking out there and happened to be right at that time? Like, I mean, I don't know how often Trump golfs there.
He golfs there all the time. I mean, that's his home course. Now, I will tell you, I grew up in Florida, specifically grew up in Boca Raton, Florida, which is only 20 minutes away, 25 minutes south of Palm Beach, Florida, where this golf course is. I never have driven past this golf course before. I had no idea there's public access roads so close to it. However, I do know in my time in the Secret Service, when there is something public close to a private area that we want to block off, we make sure that there's marked cards. We know every single person that's coming in and out of there. We also have foot patrols and various things to secure what is easily accessible to the public. That wasn't done here, and I understand that they might be limited in staff. Again, you got to use the assets that are given to you to give you the advantage point, and that being drones. It takes 3 hours, 4 hours to play that in a golf cart, let alone walking it. You know, the fact that you have such a large area and they're not using a $200 drone, to me, it just blows my mind. And the fact that this guy's able to sit there. And of course, time has come about, so we know what a lot of his motive is now. He was angry at President Trump for stopping the Iran nuclear deal back when he was the president of the United States. That's what he is upset about. He was trying to do this on behalf, or he was actually telling Iran that they can go ahead and do this now as well, because they feel that he meddled into it and disrupted something that it caused disruption in the Middle East. And so that was his reasons for wanting to go ahead and committing this crazy and atrocious act against the former president.
So that sounds very politically connected. Is this individual, by everything you've read and looked into, entrenched in politics, in extreme types of politics? I
think he was involved in some sort of extreme politics, yeah, and what he personally believes, but I also think thinks he's smarter than everybody else. I mean, you go all the way back 20, 25 years ago, I mean, he's been arrested multiple times. He had improvised explosive devices, numerous firearms-related charges. It's almost like he antagonized the police, like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And so he felt he was the smartest person ever, and here it is. He tried to assassinate the former president. Luckily, there was an amazing Secret Service agent who was doing his job to the fullest, who engaged him the moment that threat became a reality. You know, and so my hat goes off to that agent that did that. But yeah, I think this guy's a nut job. On top of being a nut job, he's politically motivated. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was very much involved with what was going on in Ukraine as well. So there's obviously some sort of political background motivation to this guy's demeanor.
Certainly extreme. Can you tell us a little bit more about the moment that the Secret Service agent fired at Routh? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Routh got a shot off, but the Secret Service agent saw him and then shot first. Is that right?
That is correct. So he was walking ahead of the president. I'm not going to give away all the details to it. However, he was a hole, maybe 2 holes ahead of former President Trump, and he noticed when he was scanning the fence line the barrel of a rifle that moved. And the moment he knew it, he immediately identified what that was and immediately engaged that target. So he started firing off shots. Then that agent went and got himself some cover behind a tree, was getting ready to reload and re-engage. However, Routh had already taken off, was running to his vehicle. And then, you know, we had a wonderful civilian, a female that saw this, knew something was going on or heard the shots, and actually got photos and videos, not only of Routh himself, but the vehicle he was getting into, and was able to provide that to law enforcement right away, which is how they knew where to go capture him. You know, there's other ways to figure out exactly where you're going at that point. And they did, and they tracked him down, they pulled him over and arrested him. So it worked out well. But no, he never got a shot off. And had that agent have missed that, I mean, just think about that. You're talking about shrubs, bushes along a fence line, and it was just a slight movement of a barrel that you could have easily got. It's a sniper's nest. I mean, he's obviously in a fortified position that's completely camouflaged and covered. I mean, he had bags in front of him that were to help conceal him as well, that also provide that protection because it had ballistic plates in it. So he was prepared to shoot it out, and then he returned fire. But clearly that agent must have put some rounds extremely close to him, and he got up and he got the heck out of there.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
What a wild scene. For him to actually have been taken without being shot was, you know, a real surprise to me. I definitely wasn't expecting that because I feel like that's not very typical. But also, I'm just wondering, like, if he didn't just park there randomly, like, what could have happened, right? Like, if he got some kind of message about when Trump would have been golfing, I guess that could have been from a number of people, including civilians at the golf course. Can you take us through, like, How would they be able to find a message like that if he was to get one? Yeah, how would investigators work on that?
It depends on what that method was. I mean, did he have a burner cell phone somewhere that he got rid of within that 45 minutes from the time that he was engaged by the Secret Service agent till he fled? So is there a phone out there that they're not aware of? What exactly was he using? I'm sure they're going through emails and his cell phone and any other means of communication that you would have had at that time. You also have those subpoenas, so if they happen to know what that was, you never know. I mean, look, it's really strange. Somebody had to tip him off somewhere. It could have come from the golf course. It could have come from anywhere. You know, again, I have to refer back to what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, that I'm still waiting for answers on, which I don't think we'll ever get. But immediately following the shooter being killed, you had a guy in a gray suit that ended up on the roof where the shooter was and was getting the officers up there to send us to his cell phone the images, right, of the deceased shooter, and ends up walking down, and everybody just assumed he was Secret Service. Well, when they did their investigation on it, when the senator started doing his investigation on it, he got that information. They called that number where they sent those images, and the guy claimed to have been an ATF agent. But here's where it goes really strange. Immediately following that call and the guy saying an ATF agent, that guy disconnected the call, okay? That phone number, it's not that if the guy went dark, that phone number no longer exists. Like, it is completely wiped free. Like, it never existed. So, again, it was somebody obviously somebody was communicating with that 20-year-old, in my opinion. Who was giving those orders? Who was that guy that was on the roof? How were they able to infiltrate? And how do you all of a sudden make a phone number erase? I can delete a cell phone, I can get rid of a number and change my number, but I can never get rid of the history of that number ever existing. How is this number completely wiped off and no longer in existence? That to me blows my mind, and that's what makes me think somebody possibly could have given Routh some information. And, you know, what were those means of communications? How did he ditch it? I don't really know. Then, of course, I'll never know unless they release it to the public. But, you know, the FBI and NSA or whoever else is involved in investigating it, hopefully they'll be able to figure that out in time. It's happened more than once now.
I'm trying to process what you said about this man in the suit and the phone number. Was there any other evidence of this person? Was there some sort of CCTV footage of him, or
in Butler, Pennsylvania? Yeah, there's a couple little photos of him, and they're trying to identify who he is. None of this information was made public by the FBI, by the Secret Service. It was the senator who's on the Intel committee who was doing the investigation that spoke to those agents and officers on the rooftop right after the shooting. They were in their SWAT gear. They're the ones who sent the guys like, hey, this suspicious man in a gray suit, send me those photos you took there. Send me those photos. This is the number. Send it here. And they sent it to him. The guy walks down the ladder and he's gone. He's gone. Completely and utterly gone. And it wasn't until a few days later when they called that number and he claimed to be an ATF agent. Well, there's no ATF agents being reported at Butler, Pennsylvania. In the past, whenever you have law enforcement, whether you're another federal agency, local law enforcement agency, we have a list of those that are law enforcement working. We have certain identifiable markings like pins that we would give to somebody, right? So we know who they are, where they are. That is not on the list. Yet, as soon as they contact this individual, he disconnects the call, and then everything is completely and utterly gone. How do you make a phone number completely disappear? Very strange.
I'm trying to piece this together, because if this guy's like, here's the number to send these photos to, he obviously isn't concerned that people would have that number. And the fact that he answered and gave an answer like, I'm with the ATF, and then disconnects and makes the phone number disappear completely, like, that's kind of brazen, right? Like, I'm going there on the scene, I'm giving my phone number out, I'm even answering when somebody calls, and now I'm going to make this phone number disappear. Like, he could have just made that disappear immediately after the photos.
That's to the level that I'm sure we would never be able to get to figure out just how far that really goes deep into whether it's an international government, whether it's our government, or some sort of spy tool. It's to a level that is beyond my comprehension.
As part of the investigations after an assassination attempt like the ones that we're speaking about, do close contacts of the person targeted have to turn over their phone?
No, not unless they find reason. I mean, look, you have your constitutional rights to the government. They just can't come in and take your stuff. But it depends on what is found. So, like, let's take, since we're talking talking about the second attempt. We're talking about Ralph. Let's say they find a cell phone. He's communicating with people. If there's anything within that phone that implicates that he told somebody of his plan or talked about his plan, they're going to naturally go and speak to people that he's communicating with to see if he's given them any other information outside of just through text messages or the phone calls. If they get information or if they believe that somebody has that information that would have given them knowledge before this took place, then yeah, absolutely, they can go and request it. They could get a search warrant for your phone. They can subpoena you, things such as that. But more than likely, they're just going to get a search warrant and go take your phone and do what they call a phone rip. I mean, they absolutely can, but they have to have reason to be able to do it. And more than just a suspicion, you know, like when they talk about probable cause is 50% plus one. So I just have to have more than a reasonable suspicion that this took place. I have more than a reasonable suspicion that you had knowledge prior to this assassination attempt that you were forewarned of it. Therefore, now I can go ahead and justify getting a search warrant, getting it signed off on by the judge, and then going after that.
What is the parameters for someone who's been arrested over 100 times? If I'm reading the articles correctly, this man had been arrested over 100 times. A lot of them, I guess, were traffic violations. But even if they're traffic violations, how many times do you have to be arrested before you're put on a list that is just sort of a general danger to society?
The traffic offenses, clearly you're just a nuisance at this point, but he had some very violent arrests as well.
Right.
When you're talking about the improvised explosive devices, the gun charges and things like that, the 3-strike rule comes into effect, but at what point are you a habitual and we just need to lock you up because you're a menace to society? Fortunately, these laws exist for those purposes. Unfortunately, nobody ever enforces them. And, you know, I feel like that's where the biggest problem has come in from many years ago, the United States and our judicial system, is the lack of charging people for what it is. I mean, how many times do you see prosecutors pleading somebody down? It could be their third or fourth DWI at this point, and they're pleading them down to a slap on the wrist, pay a fine, because they want that 98, 99% conviction rating as opposed to taking somebody to trial and making an example out of them. People always forget that the punishment for crimes was to act as a deterrent to keep you from doing crimes. But when you continuously slap somebody in the wrist and you never enforce it, then what is the penalty? I mean, you look at it today, and I'll tell you, even from my own law enforcement experiences, I have people that I have arrested multiple times, and it doesn't mean that a lot of them, this one in particular I'm going to talk about, that it was like every 3 or 4 months was behind on child support and would end up arresting him. He'd have to go sit in jail, get a court hearing, be behind, get a job, try working his butt off to pay it off, and, you know, you just constantly arrest them over the same things. In fact, I won't even go into, I'll go into a different one. Somebody I had arrested a couple of times over, literally see him walking in a neighborhood one time. He takes off running, has a little crime, has a small little warrant, takes off running, knows he's going to get arrested, knows he's going to go to jail. And it's not that he wanted to run from me. It's because he had a massive toothache, and he knew that if he gets arrested and goes to jail, we're going to pay for it. So I might as well have my little warrant, make myself known, enhance my charge by running, and now you got to take me to jail where I can complain of my toothache, but now you have to take me somewhere to get it fixed, and I don't have to pay for it. Between that, providing surgeries, doing all these things, there's college education. Like, there's so much that's being paid for a criminal. It's better for them to be in jail than it is to be out because they get treated better. That's when you have to look at your penal institution and go, what the hell are we doing? I am for trying to educate and trying to, you know, give counseling and make a lot of these offenders, you know, give them what they did not have, maybe what they lacked. But at what point do you draw the line in the sand and go, okay, wait a minute here. We're paying for this surgery. We're paying for this. We're paying for that. I think you get away from what the idea of what these penalties are supposed to be. It's supposed to act as a deterrent. And we've completely eliminated that. I mean, nobody's afraid to get arrested anymore. Why not? I'll be back out on the street in a day.
I can assure you I'm afraid to get arrested.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get arrested either, you know, but a lot of these criminals, I mean, my gosh, they can commit these heinous crimes and they know they're going to be on the street in a day or two. So what's going to stop them from doing it?
And we'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Thanks to our sponsors, and now we're back to the program.
I don't want to sound like, you know, the old guy get off my lawn type thing, but there's just a disregard for rules because there's not a lot of serious ramifications, and maybe it's just like a different generation. But if I have a toothache, I'm going to figure out a way to work out a payment plan with my dentist to try to get it fixed. I'm not going to commit a crime and rely on whatever dental program they have in prison.
There's so many people that will get arrested just so they can get their medical condition taken care of. We have to take care of them when they're under our custody and control. But you're talking about doing elective procedures for people while they're in prison and things such as that. Like, that's not rehabilitating anybody. That's not helping them. That's just filling their personal needs, and we're catering to it. And again, the penalties for crimes are supposed to act as a deterrent to keep you from doing the crimes. If you can go and assault somebody and beat somebody up and rob them and be out on the street in a few days with a slap on your wrist, because they're never going to prosecute you for it because that's just the area that you live in, why wouldn't you go right back out to doing it again? What's going to stop you from doing it again? How many times do you see on the news where they have somebody arrested, they lock them up, they get out 48 hours to kill somebody? When do you start holding these prosecutors or these elected officials responsible for what they're doing? I mean, it's pure negligence. At what point do you draw the line in the sand and you stop it? And until people realize, hey, I don't want anything to do with that, I'm going to stop. I mean, look back what happened. I'll go back 25 years ago. You had that one kid that went to Singapore with his family for a summer vacation who decided he was going to, spray paint a wall and tag it. It was something we used to have here in the United States all the time. People would go and spray paint and put the little tags on the brick wall. Well, that's what he did while in Singapore, a U.S. citizen. So what did they do? They arrested him. You know what his punishment was 3 canings. And if people don't realize what canings is, the first shot of a caning actually split your ass cheeks open, literally. And he got 3 of those. He couldn't sit on his butt for 8 months because it was that painful. You think he's ever going to go spray paint a wall again? I'm not saying that's the type of crime we need to get to, but do you think anybody else wants to go and get a caning after that? Absolutely not. I'm not saying we got to do something like that here, but my gosh, if you're supposed to get 15 years, you need to serve your 15 years. That's going to stop people from wanting to commit those crimes again.
I want to kind of bring it back to this assassination attempt with this individual who attempted to perpetrate this attempt, but he also had a self-published book. Like, a lot of information is out there. What is your insight into people who have put the information out there and the line between law enforcement acting on written information without the actual action happening yet?
It depends on what level it gets viewed. I know anytime you're going to write something that, like, you're a former government employee and things like that, you have to submit it to a certain agency and they have to be able to review it. It's all out there. It's not like this information isn't known to law enforcement. But if somebody's essentially telling you what their playbook is, you have to make a note of that and you have to monitor it, to ensure that they don't actually act on the list or the fantasies that they have or what they're wanting to do, their wish list. You can't just ignore it. I think a lot of this just goes into the amount of accessibility there is, whether it's the internet or so on, where people just can look up, can order, can say whatever they want, and people just take it as, you're just saying that. At some point or another, we got to start taking this stuff serious. We got to look at it and create a list. I mean, it's just the way it is. If you want to put your stuff out there about the harm that you want to do to others, you should be monitored.
Ryan Routh guy pled not guilty recently. I don't know why he would plead guilty or not guilty, but I'm confused on what case he thinks he has with this. Do you have any insight in this?
All attorneys are going to advise their client, even with the burden of proof, to plead not guilty. And the reason you do that is so you can move further. You want to see the evidence that's being presented. So you want to get it to a certain point in the preliminary hearing aspect of things to where maybe there's technicalities that you can get your client off the charge for. So you want to be able to suppress the motion to suppress evidence. You want to hear what information is there. It kind of gives you it's really for the defense. It gives them an opportunity to know what we're up against. Can we beat it? Is there something that they did wrong as a part of their investigation? Did they violate his constitutional rights? Did they not do his Miranda rights? Did they not collect evidence the right way? Did the chain of custody get broken along that evidence chain? Things such as that they can use for their client. If there's a defense attorney out there that has their clients going on their first initial appearance pleading guilty, never hire that attorney. I mean, that's just the way it is. But they're always going to tell you, plead not guilty, and that is so you can hear and go through the process to find out if everything was done correctly. And then from there, work a plea deal or take it to trial if you find something that, unless you can't get the case thrown out altogether. But you got to get a free shot at it, and that's essentially what it is for an attorney. It's a defense attorney. It's a free shot to look at what the case is. So you never plead guilty. You always plead not guilty.
The other question I have is, you referenced the lack of Secret Service agents, like physical bodies there to protect somebody. What is the regulations or rules or parameters around hiring private protection agency? Couldn't one of these people in the position of former President Trump hire a security agency in addition to having Secret Service?
You could. The problems you run into there is the Secret Service's training is not easy. It's not for the weak. There's a lot of sensitive information that's given throughout. That's why you have to have your top secret clearance. They don't give you the clearance because what you're told directly, it's what you overhear. But there are some movements and things like that that will be considered classified. So hiring an outside agency, one, they're not going to have the clearances in order to be able to be on that detail, so can you trust them with that? And not all those people on there have the squeaky clean backgrounds that they try to have with the Secret Service personnel. They haven't been through our training. So when you're doing, strong side, weak side drop-offs and things like that, which I'm not going to get into all the terminologies and the things that we go through, but you're not specifically trained in the way that the Secret Service does it. And so having armed people that don't have the clearances, that don't have the training, and they're working amongst the Secret Service, it's almost like we'd have to watch them too. And so I just feel that that's a recipe for disaster. I feel the Secret Service needs to do, in my opinion, in the quickest way to beef up any one of the Secret Service details, whether it's a current president, former first lady, things such as that, is I think the Secret Service needs to get away from doing investigations and just be strictly protection. A lot of people don't realize it, but all these field offices you have all across the country, unless there's a specific detail, security protection detail in their immediate area or in that region, they're working investigations. So you're talking about counterfeit money machines, white collar crimes, money laundering, things of that nature. I think the Secret Service needs to give that up. You just give that to the Department of Treasury, let the Treasury Department agents work it on the investigation aspect of it, and you have all Secret Service personnel, because they've all had to go through the protection training, and they are strictly just protection. And that right there could plus up your numbers by, add 50 to 100 people on Trump detail or former President Obama's detail or wherever it's needed. That's what I feel would be the quickest fix, but I also think it just puts the Secret Service with one specific job, and that's to protect. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize that the Secret Service had moved on from just protection and into more investigative services. When did that happen?
Oh, they've been doing that for many, many, many years. Most everybody knows the Secret Service because of the protection of the President of the United States or Vice President and things such as that. But at these field offices, the Secret Service has one of the absolute best crime labs in the entire world. So we do a lot of agency assists because the crime lab is so good. But people don't realize a lot of the investigative aspects of it. Yeah, we investigate threats towards the president or protected personnel, but there's counterfeit money, there's money machines, there's money laundering, there's all kinds of investigative branches that they have to dive into from their field offices. And I just think that needs to go. It's time for our Secret Service to have one mission and one mission only, and it's protection.
Well, once again, you've come on and you've provided clear answers. You've provided insightful opinions, and I hope that the listeners are taking as much from this conversation as they can. I know Tim and I have as well, but I'm curious if you can give any insight on what makes for a perfect batting practice pitch.
Be able to throw it to the same spot consistently, because when you're all over the place, they get mad pretty quick. And yes, my son plays baseball, and I'm the batting practice coach. Like to throw BP to them. They get excited with it. It's fun. They're all high school kids. And in fact, all of them are pretty much Division I baseball commits, which is pretty exciting. But I have a lot of fun just doing that and being a part of that and being there with my son, since I only have another year left with him before he's off playing college or pro ball. So it's fun.
Very cool. Well, Jim Rathmann, thank you so much for joining us here again today. This was another great conversation about another assassination attempt, though, unfortunately. Hopefully there aren't more. As you said earlier, you wouldn't be surprised. But thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me, and I look forward to coming on and talk with you guys again soon. Just hoping it's not for an assassination or assassination attempt, gentlemen, but I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.